Hi friends, welcome to my channel. My name's Fiddle. Today, we're going to be making this miniature armoire. And like always, don't forget to check the link in the description labeled Scavenger Hunt. That will take you to the list of materials and free printable patterns so you can make this along with me. Okay, are you ready? Let's go. We're going to start by cutting all of our pattern pieces out of the material that we're going to be using. Today I'm using chipboard and I'm doubling up my layers, with a few exceptions. If I were to make the piece over again, this face piece I would actually make out of wood. And the other is the top piece to the armoire. We need it to be pretty flexible, so one layer or even something thinner like poster board would work. Also, I didn't label everything as being double layered, so you'll have to account for what pieces you need. The only ones that don't need to be doubled up are the drawers. The red X's indicate areas that we need to cut out completely, but it's a good idea to save the bottom two X's because we can use those when we go to make our drawers. Once you have all of your pieces traced, it's time to cut them out. Next, add double-sided tape to all the pieces that need it, and stick them together. I used 3 layers for the base, but the rest of them were all 2. Hold off on putting the door layers together though. We need to do a few things to them first. And if you wanted to add any decorative paper to the inside shelves or the back walls, this would be a good time to do it before we get it all put together. I used a dark green on the back and sides, and a lighter green on the shelves. Okay, now let's move on to working on the doors. Start by removing the double-sided tape backing from one side of your door. Then layer clear plastic over top of that. Next, add 2 hinges to the shorter side of the door, making sure that the hinge pin was right at the edge of the door, and you'll want them fairly close to the top and bottom of the door, maybe about 1/4 of an inch away. With the hinges in place, add another piece of double-sided tape just over top of them so that way it makes it sticky again. Next, peel the double-sided tape off the other side of the door and stick it on top. Take your time so you can try to get it centered because once it's down, it's down. Next, you'll need your choice of temporary tattoos. We're going to stick these to the doors and make it look a little fancier. Wipe the window clean with alcohol, then use a damp rag to add just a thin layer of water, then lay your tattoo down. Use the damp towel again to moisten the back of the tattoo paper completely, then let it sit for a minute before removing it. Remove the paper carefully, and if you have any places that are sticking up, you can use the rag to tap it down. This is what it looks like up close. I think it turned out so well. Although I think now that I should have put a layer of clear fingernail polish over top of it, because I noticed that after a few days the edges of the tattoo started to flake away. I'm not sure if the whole thing will, but just in case, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Now that we have the doors done, let's move on to making the rest of the armoire. You'll need the first page to our pattern and the back wall. Start by folding your pattern at the first shelf line. Lay it over top of the back wall and draw a line across. Repeat the process for all 5 shelves. Once you have your guidelines for the shelves drawn, we can move on to building. The first pieces we're going to put together are the backboard and the sidewalls. Next is the shelves. Add glue along all three sides and then slip it in place using the lines that we drew earlier as a guide. Unfortunately for most of the shelves, my head was in the way, but finally for the last one I was able to get a full shot of me putting it in place. Next to go on is the face, and you can hold it in place with painter's tape until it dries completely. Now we're ready to put the top on, but we're gonna go slow and do it bit by bit. And you'll need to have some pieces of painter's tape ready to go. The first thing we need to do is add glue along half of the top. Then starting at the edge, use tape to hold it in place. With one hand, squeeze the edges together, while the other one bends the chipboard into the curved shape, and use tape to hold it in place until it dries. Keep going until you reach the other side, and then trim off the excess. While the top's drying, we can add the base. Set it aside to dry, and we're going to move on to making the drawers. Start with the drawer bottom and add tape around the edges. Then glue on one of the long side walls and use the tape to hold it in place. Then the short ones on either side of the long one. And finally, the long walls. I waited until just before I put the face on to put the other side wall on. Not sure why, just did. And it really doesn't matter, you can do it now or you can do it later, it's completely up to you. I just didn't finish building them at this point in time. Okay, now onto the drawer faces. For this you'll need one big one and one little one. Add double-sided tape to the smaller one. You could also glue this if you don't want to use the tape. After you get them stuck together, set them aside. We'll come back to them in a few minutes. But for now, we're going to start sanding and painting. This is also a good time to fill in any gaps that you might have, and the best way to do that is to mix up some wood shavings and white glue. Once you've gotten everything smoothed out, we can move on to painting. If you put paper on your shelves like I did, make sure you put painter's tape over them before you start painting. I started with a medium brown and then came back in with a light tan color and dry brushed it. While we're waiting for the paint to dry, let's move on to making the handles. Start by marking out the center on the front of both drawer faces. Then use a pokey tool to poke the hole. Next, we need to add double-sided tape to the side of the drawer that we're going to be adding the face to. Now that the drawer face is ready, let's make the handles. For this, we'll need jewelry pins with a flat head. And some sort of round bead. I went with pearls. Then a flat round bead. poke the jewelry pin through the hole that we made earlier and bend the back of it down. Peel the covering of the double-sided tape, then stick the drawer face to the drawer. If you want to add another glue in between there as well, you can, or you don't even have to use the double-sided tape. Now we're going to repeat the same process for the doors. Lay them next to each other and find out where you want to put your handles and mark a dot. And I just realized that I should have flipped one of the flowers over because they're not mirrored. Oh well, okay, so if you go to make this, put a flower on the inside and one on the outside of the clear plastic, so that way they're mirrored. Anyways, poke holes where you marked your spots. Then poke the post through the hole and bend it on the back side. This time we want to make sure that we get it as close to it as we possibly can. I ended up using my pliers. Now that we have the pin in place, we need to add the inside door trim. This covers up the back of the pin, plus it puts a gap in between the shelves and the doors so your doors don't fall inwards. Once the doors have had time to dry, we can finally install them on the cupboard. Lay your doors in place and mark out where your hinges are with a pencil. Then add a multi-surface glue to the back of the hinges and set the door in place. And fair warning, the next few steps can get a little frustrating. Take a few breaths and you've got this. If your hinges are like mine, they came with teeny tiny little nails. We need to poke holes where the holes are on our hinges and put the tiny nails in. I used the end of my pliers to push the pins down in. It takes some doing, but it can be done. The hardest part for me was poking the holes for the pins. The cardboard kept folding inwards. That's one of the reasons why I said back at the beginning if I were to make it again, I would have made the face out of wood. And I think the next time I'll just hand make my hinges and not use these store-bought ones. Not only are they hard to install, but they don't work the greatest either. And we have one more thing left to do, and that is to make a few linen pieces to go inside. For that, I used a few swatches of fabric and some thin craft foam. Fold your swatches a few times, cut a piece of foam that fits just inside to where you can't see it, and use double-sided tape to stick everything together. Just like we did for the wash basin. I do plan to put other things in here, but I haven't decided on what yet. And with that, it brings us to the end of our tutorial. I hope this gives you some ideas for your next project, or you follow along in making it with me. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for being here. If you're new, welcome. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Our next project will be a bathtub, sitz bath, and bucket. Thank you, Ginger, and I'll see you next time.